Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today's webinar is Future of Product Visualization, Maintaining Continuity Through Shifting Environments. Thanks again for being here. Today's webinar is hosted by IPX, the Institute for Process Excellence, along with our special guest, Vertex, a remote 3D collaboration platform. I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. IPX President Joseph Anderson, Vertex's Product Marketing Manager John Heller, and Vertex's Content Marketing Manager Rachel Holmes. A recorded version of today's session will be available following the live version. After the presentation, we will have time for a few questions. If we do not get to your question during the time allotted, please type them into the question box and they will be answered via email from either IPX or Vertex. For anyone who is just joining, hello and welcome to today's session, Future of Product Visualization, Maintaining Continuity Through Shifting Environments. And with that, I will turn it over to Joseph Anderson.
Thanks, Deanna. Rachel, John, thanks for joining us today, and for all of those of you that have chosen to join this webinar. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're at across the globe. Thank you for joining. We know these times right now can be a bit stressful. Over the last 2 months, all of us have experienced the new norm, and that's just rapidly changed the way we work, the way we communicate, and the way we need to stay connected. So with that, before we talk about Vertex, Rachel and John, if you could, let's get to know you. Could you give us a little detail about who you are, your background, and what brought you to Vertex?
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. Thank you for having us on today. Again, my name is John Heller. Been with Vertex just a little bit less than 2 years now. Spent prior to that about 18 years in the manufacturing industry in a broad variety of roles, spanning engineering, product development, supply chain, marketing, and lived firsthand a lot of the issues that can creep up in business processes just in what we used to know as the normal, and now certainly things have become a little bit more challenging. So was particularly excited to join Vertex, and I'm excited to be here today and to discuss some of these topics with you. Rachel.
Yeah, thanks again, Joe, for having us here. Again, my name is Rachel Holmes. I've been with Vertex for just over 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent several years at a tech company that built high-end VR immersive solutions. So kind of had my hands in visualization for a long time now. And in all ways, just looking for ways to help improve collaboration, design efforts, training simulations, different ways to help business objectives meet their goals.
Thank you. It's going to dive into where we're all at right now. The buzz phrase prior to the virus and really the lockdown of the globe and businesses all around really was digital transformation. And it was hit pretty hot and heavy for probably the last 2 years. And quite honestly, that's just about shifting environments. And, you know, from a marketing and branding perspective, those sectors always have to find a new way to challenge businesses, regardless of the size, and individuals to be aware of what's changing and what's on the horizon. For myself personally, and for those of us at IPX, it really wasn't about digital transformation. I started as an automotive apprentice almost 25 years ago. And I guess I'll age myself. It's my turn now. I didn't have a cell phone. I had 2 pagers, one for everyone and one for my boss. And I didn't have a laptop. And, you know, rapidly within the last 20 years, digital transformation has really kind of hit us all in the face. And I think we're now at a time where it's more digital acceptance. And that means we've got a new way of operating across supply chain. We see a lot of joint design, joint manufacturing. We see a lot of complexity with regulatory requirements in those environments, regardless if it's a large global enterprise or an SMB. Having the ability to stay connected, to collaborate, to have data interoperability across the supply chain has really become kind of an issue. And what we're seeing at IPX is a focus more on a digital platform, modern business models. You know, I would say the 2000s, the early 2000s, between 2002, 2000 and honestly 15, PLM was kind of marketed as a holy grail. You know, you're going to have one system that could do it all. It was going to do ERP, it was going to do the 3D enterprise, model-based design, it was going to do data collaboration. And quite honestly, that just hasn't happened. Companies have sunk millions in trying to figure it out. And most of them, at the end of the day, I believe, are still using very, very sophisticated PDM systems. So John and Rachel, can you kind of expand and introduce Vertex into that thought and into today's digital acceptance, and really what does Vertex allow us to do as a community, as a supply chain, to stay connected, to share the complex data models and the visuals? What does Vertex actually enable us to do that PLM just can't do?
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. Thank you for that lead in. The issues that we see predominantly with the customers we discuss, and the same group that you've discussed, Joseph, as well, is for many years they've been pitched and sold a silver bullet, if you will, that would fix all of their problems, would connect everyone, would bring everyone into a common platform, enabling them to keep business moving forward. We find that a lot of times, as you mentioned, this whole buzzword of digital transformation was forced on people. Instead of rather people embracing it, it was something that was said, we have to do this, we have to do it. People were struggling to get on board with that. Many service providers were also out there saying, if you don't step on this train, you're going to be left behind. So a lot of pushing. Where we're finding ourselves in now is an opportunity where people are starting to embrace digital transformation as the new normal, and not just because they want to hop on the word of digital transformation, but because their customers need it, their processes need it. They realize there's a true need for it now. And so where Vertex comes in is we're not here to disrupt the investments, replace the resources and the investments that have been made into PLM systems, methodologies, but we realized that there was a real gap when it came to the practicality of those processes and methodologies, that there were certain parts of the organization that were being left out, even though on paper it looked like they were being included. And so that's where we're coming in, is really extending the value of the investments that companies have made and enabling them to move their business processes forward. And Rachel, I know you've done a lot of content and a lot of blog work around that, and what you're seeing from our customers is also around just how do we practically make this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly, especially in the situations that we're seeing ourselves in right now, the modern or the legacy processes of how people would collaborate and how people would work together. Obviously, we're seeing right now that there's a lot of problems with that kind of a workflow of expecting to be able to, I need to collaborate with different members of my supply chain, or I need to collaborate with different members of my team. I need to jump on a plane or go sit in a conference room with these people. Obviously, that's something that clearly isn't working right now. And I think we're only going to continue to see, even as we continue to morph into this new normal, the old normal isn't ever going to be able to come back the way that it was. So I think that companies have a lot of opportunity right now to embrace digital transformation and digital acceptance in a way that you've never really been able to do so before.
So I'm going to dig in here a little bit. And for the audience that knows me, I like to challenge individuals and businesses. So there's probably a few of them that won't admit to what I'm about ready to describe. And I'd like you to, maybe take us a little bit further on how Vertex could really change not only those workflows and those processes, but kind of the legacy mindset, but also keep us from cutting corners. And I think that's a lot of issues businesses struggle with, and rightfully so, they're not going to admit they do it. But let's say we have this very complex network of CAD systems, PLM, we've got advanced simulation, we've got connected and integrated ERP, but we still have our resources taking screen captures or images with their phone, and they're sending those unsecurely to their suppliers, their tier one. Those tier ones are submitting the same images via email or a text message to their tier two or tier three. And that data just at the end of the day, one, it's not efficient, two, it's not secure, and three, it's not truly connected. And we're losing the ability to move through those processes efficiently. And one thing I like to say is also the effectiveness. So you have your standard kind of quality management platform processes, right? Your change management from an enterprise perspective, all those touch points, project management, program management, quality. But at the end of the day, it's those smaller hidden factory workflows, right? Where it's the things you do in between each PLM step, where a lot of manual processes still exist and a lot of waste still exists, especially when you're talking about sharing data and sharing a CAD model or a visual. How does Vertex, one, go about working with companies to kind of peel back that security blanket? We know this is how you've always had to operate. Here's a better way. Not only is it better, it's going to make you more efficient and effective. It's going to keep you from cutting corners. And then the one thing I'd like to kind of segue at the end is, how do you guarantee security? Because at the end of the day, you're talking about a med device, you're talking about military, you're talking about aero, you're talking ITAR, export control. What's the foundational kind of security model of Vertex? And I apologize for the weighted questions there, but I think at the end of the day, when you start talking about workflows, a lot of people take that too lightly. And I'd like to really expand upon what you have to do at Vertex to make those workflows truly dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. A lot of meat in that question, and I'll do my best to answer, and Rachel as well. So, at the outset, just backing up to what you kind of led with around mindset and behaviors, absolutely key. The industries that I came from, you traditionally had very entrenched ways of doing things. You were sold a bill of goods. Because of those investments, you stuck to it. You accepted limitations that you viewed as normal at the time because it wasn't apparent that there was a better way of doing it. Then when we found out that, then when companies are faced with a crisis, let's say, instead of finding a way to corner more effectively, corners get cut. And corners may get cut unintentionally. And, I want to be very careful with that. I don't believe at the root of it that people deep down seriously are looking to maliciously cut corners. But because of environments, because of, I would say, lack of planning or lack of knowledge or lack of awareness, corners get cut. And at the heart of Vertex is that we're enabling companies to come together in a platform that enables them to pivot, to be agile, to do things the right way quickly. And I think now there's probably a broader awareness with companies that are faced with the challenges of remote collaboration, faced with the challenges of connecting with customers, faced with the challenges of ensuring product quality, that what gets shipped out the back door is still held at the same levels that they were when everybody was in the building, so to speak. And now is a time for, I would say, reflection on how things can be made better. And so that's really a passion of Vertex, is enabling companies to come together in a common platform, see the data, visualize the data, collaborate remotely now that we are, and being able to corner more effectively into that. So Rachel, I know from a security standpoint, we've recently launched a couple of blogs and some articles about how we specifically address security.
Yeah, so great segue, John, and thank you, Joe. So I think one of the biggest things that we hear a lot is, how can I make sure that my proprietary information, my sensitive data, the things that make my company unique, how do we make sure that those stay locked down and that they don't get leaked? And I think that that's a lot of questions that, especially now that we're all remote, that's a big problem. And even prior to this, John alluded to it a little bit, and so did you, Joe, is this idea of how do I get information to people? And the processes that are required to do that are extremely time consuming, we find. It could take hours and hours to strip models, to get it into a format that could be shared out, to make sure that all of your sensitive information is hidden away from that model. And in some cases, again, as John said, not trying to maliciously cut corners, but when you have to meet deadlines, you have to make things work. So you end up taking a screenshot and sending that out instead. So in these processes, we find there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's a lot of space for something to go wrong, especially when it comes to security. So we take security extremely seriously at Vertex. And one of the things that when thinking about security and legacy mindsets and legacy processes is how we think about security. Now, one of the benefits of working in Vertex and products similar to ours is that we are cloud-based. And I know that a lot of manufacturers and a lot of companies kind of get a little leery when it comes to the cloud. They're like, whoa, cloud isn't secure. The cloud can get hacked. If I put it up in the cloud, who knows who can have access to that? And that's one of those legacy mindsets that I think that we're challenging right now. Yes, maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the cloud was a little bit less secure than it is now. But the way that the cloud works today is much, much different. So I think there's two aspects to the cloud and security mindset. And the first is what we already talked about. What are you doing right now to make sure that your data is protected? And what we find is corners can get cut, processes can be inefficient. You might think that what you're doing is secure, but really it could be leading down a dangerous path. And then on the second point, you have to think that the cloud now is much, much safer than it used to be and much, much more secure. And if you think about cloud providers like Microsoft Azure or like AWS, they built these platforms with security, and they really make sure that your data stays secure in the cloud. They develop the latest and greatest in security best practices. So by nature, cloud is secure. So when it comes to processes, I think that when companies are looking at ways to optimize and modernize their processes, especially when it comes to remote collaboration and when it comes to visualizing product data, they need to look for things that will help them scale, help them grow, and help them manage different crises like this or other, things even before we're all working remote now. How do you make sure you hit your timelines and things like that? Looking for processes and ways that help people grow and scale as opposed to trapping them in an outdated legacy process.
Thank you. Those are both great answers. And I think it's a good kind of segue into, kind of a pet peeve of mine. We've heard for years prior to this that if I don't see my employee, they're not working. So they have to be at their desk. They have to be there for at least 8 hours sitting, even in a non-required environment where they technically only need a computer, a phone, and internet. And for me, I'm hoping, what this brings, I always look for the good in things. There's been a lot of bad that's happened. I've had friends that have caught the virus, businesses are closing, but we still have to figure out a new way of working. And one of those is to challenge these managers, and some of them are my peers, quite honestly, that they need to let go of how they manage their organization as well. It is, and IPX has been a remote organization for 30 years, a global remote organization for over 30 years. We've been doing it before cell phones and laptops, if that tells you anything. So we've kind of mastered it. And staying connected now is more important than ever, and having flexibility so you could hire the best employees regardless of where they live, and having this technology that it ensures quality, enhances delivery, right? And I think Rachel and John both, that's what you were touching on. Typically, schedules get committed to well before the design's approved. Mm-hmm. And the schedule doesn't get changed, which has always been a bit funny from my side. And I think that's why we still see today, if you go to recalls.gov, many people know I bring this up all the time, we still have a major quality issue. We're still releasing product defects across the board that are injuring, they're killing consumers. And from my seat and for what we do, that's unacceptable. And I think it's like both of you said, it's not nefarious, it's not malicious, it's become the normalcy, right? And I think consumers have somewhat gotten complacent, right? There used to be a day that we demanded quality in our product, and I think that's going to come back. I truly do. I think we're going to see the next true revolution, so to speak, is consumers demanding quality across the spectrum, and having that ecosystem that's connected. It's quite an intriguing proposition, and I still hope our attendees and our listeners are realizing this isn't just about improving their siloed organization or enterprise or ecosystem. It's about improving the connections and the connectivity across their ecosystem, and that's quite powerful. So from value, competitive edge, there's a whole lot of things that we could expand upon. And John, you come from this world. You and I have similar kind of backgrounds of the living these industrial nightmares from a procurement side, from a value side, where your ROI initially on the product, the margins were going to be huge, but by the time you get down to cutting metal, you're actually losing money. How do you see Vertex kind of fitting into that and fixing some of those issues?
You're absolutely right, Joseph. I can't accurately count the number of projects that I sat on where you started out with a lofty profit margin goal, cost goal, a lofty innovation goal, a lofty timeline, and slowly but surely, as you moved through the product development process, those eroded. And you found that what rose to the top of that was companies pushing for shortened timelines. It seems like it always comes down to shortened timelines, and so that puts pressure on individuals to perform quicker, and then that's where we see these corners getting cut. I remember specifically in many of these projects, and as most companies know, they try to do as much innovation at the front end as possible. However, there's a couple of what I would still come back to are mindset and behaviors early on in a project, where companies, and in particular perhaps engineers, because they know they're iterating pretty quickly on a design, don't want to let something out of their grasp for fear that a wrong decision is going to be made or something's not quite done correctly, or perhaps the feedback needs to wait until a little bit later. And so where we see the most benefit is getting the collective organization to come together as early as possible. And that's not just within the walls of the organization, but also throughout the supply chain, through the customer base. Number one, building loyalty as quickly as you can, brand loyalty. Also, developing true partnerships with your suppliers, not viewing them as transactional, not viewing them as a need to know basis, but really bringing them in, and together, the collective, putting together an innovation or a product that truly meets the needs. And that's where Vertex comes in. We enable companies to be able to send the data out securely. And I think, as Rachel mentioned, the big hesitation early on is letting something go, not knowing where it might land or knowing that it might change. And so Vertex has taken great care in the security of that. In fact, we were discussing earlier that our founder and CEO came from a company that was that started in the financial industry and bringing everyone together on highly sensitive financial information. And you can imagine the repercussions if sensitive financial information gets leaked. Well, it's that same type of approach that's been brought in to this manufacturing environment with the Vertex platform. And that should really free people to realize that, you know what, I have the appropriate safety security measures in place. I can go out very early in this process. I can do the due diligence up front and make sure that the appropriate innovations are received, the appropriate boxes are checked, and we can keep this timeline.
Just about knocked my computer over. That would have been interesting. So Rachel, that's a good segue into my challenge for you. And it's before I give you the buzzword, from my experience, data has been kind of a necessary evil in the past. The words data migration, data cleansing, your data model typically gave people migraines, and you invested years and years of efforts into migrating into these new systems. Rachel, what does embracing data mean to you and Vertex? And how do you get an organization to realize their data and that data model and the connectivity of that data, the interoperability, is now actually a competitive advantage?
Absolutely. I think that one of the big things that we see right now is the idea of big data, right? You have all of these different areas where data is coming in. You look at IoT sensors, you look at information from the shop floor and out in the field, and how are my products and my components operating in, in testing or out actually in service. And you get all of that data in, but now your organization is left with, okay, what am I supposed to do with all of this? Just like you said, how am I supposed to find out the insights from this? How am I supposed to take all of this information and put it into something actionable? And that's also something that with our platform, we're really passionate about. We want to give companies the insights that they need to make better business decisions. So the way that we're doing that is we're able to help our customers leverage our platform for any stage of their process so they can take information and visualize it. So in one example, we've been able to absorb information from IoT sensors on a product in the field, and we're able to take that information, plug it into our platform, use our visualization engine to take that information and spin it in a way so you can visually see, okay, everything in green here is doing good, things in orange here are maybe starting to falter. Now I can go in and fix those before they break. These things that are in the red here, this is an area where we can improve, and we can take that back to the design floor and say, okay, how are we going to fix this problem in the future? So looking for ways to take all of your data, and we all know that we see things and that's the best way to process them. There's been countless studies on how really seeing is believing, right? You're able to process information very, very quickly when you can see it. So we're taking that principle and giving people back the visuals of their data so they can quickly make decisions.
Yeah, and Joseph, if I could add one thing to that, with the time that we're living in at this moment, as Rachel said, what can you do with data? How can you leverage it within your business processes and maintain business continuity? I really subscribe to the priority list of safety of your employees and your customers, the quality of your product, then delivery, then cost. And this time that we're living in, if many companies are thinking about how do I maintain business continuity while protecting my employees, perhaps being able to use, if we could just imagine being able to use data in some way where you, as Rachel mentioned, it could be combined with visuals, and imagine somebody remotely being able to take that data, visually see what component out on the manufacturing floor or what component perhaps out in the service that a customer is using is about ready to fault out or is receiving some error codes. And then we can be very strategic while protecting the exposure of employees and protecting our customers' usage of a particular product and being able to surgically go in and diagnose and fix a problem before it even happens.
Yeah, and I think that leads into a favorite topic of mine. It's about removing those barriers, right? From a data perspective, from a process perspective, mindset perspective. And I think that's the big challenge in getting business to understand. You need to ensure you're investing in fit for purpose solutions.
Right.
Don't be dazzled by the lights. Make sure the solution is fit for purpose for you, but also the organization, right, that supports and develops that solution, because that's just as important in my experience as the IT capability. And the one thing I'd like to remind, I think you've touched on it, John, our attendees and our listeners after we cascade this out, is a solution is going to only be as efficient and effective as your process. So if you force your solution provider to shoehorn in a bad process, you're still going to get bad data. You might get it a little bit more quicker. You might have a better connected ecosystem, but you still have to have proper processes. And John, I think that's what you were touching on. It's, and that's near and dear to my heart as well. Success is derived from the safety of your employees, the happiness of your workforce, the education and training of your workforce, having a modern business model, and then innovation thrives, right? That's what you want your workforce to do is to develop innovative product and get it to the field as fast as possible with guaranteed quality. So absolutely echo that, John. And one thing I would like to touch on a little bit is really that platform perspective. And I want to make sure the attendees and the listeners understand you're not just talking about connecting their internal workforce. You will partner and work with their supply chain as well. And you have the ability to integrate via most likely APIs, and you could talk from a technical perspective and doing those discovery workshops with their suppliers. So you're really trying to grow that out and expand that connection out. And that's where it gets really powerful. And if you could, John, maybe that's a good opportunity. I told you I would challenge you to eventually, not only talk about what Vertex does, but also maybe give us a little sneak peek demo. Maybe right now would be a good time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, hopefully you should be able to see this screen here. So Joseph, real quickly, earlier you posed the question about data interoperability, barriers to sharing the data, barriers to putting the data out where individuals are able to access it. Here you see the landing page into the Vertex platform, and as you can notice up here, we're a web-enabled browser platform. There's no software to be downloaded, no hardware requirements needed. Nothing to be able to access the platform. As long as you've got an internet connection or you're on cellular in some way, you're able to access this platform. And as you mentioned, getting data in, the data transformation process, and this again, if I can just pause real quickly, this whole data transformation process is potentially where corners can get cut again, because companies have to pull out data, strip out data, reformat data, perhaps create an orphaned file that's separated from the source of truth. And as that's the only mechanism that somebody can receive it and consume the information. And so we provide a couple different ways of bringing data into the Vertex platform, either as you mentioned through an API that's tied directly into their PLM or PDM system and can be scripted to pull in data at a predetermined time frame, or by simply uploading from your desktop device. We accept all major over 25 different file formats, native and neutral file formats in here. So literally no data transformation needed once you get into it. One of the things that I would like to point out here there's stories. So stories are, I could just pull up an example here, and this is really our method for collaborating. And if you can see here, this first snapshot, as I come in here, is a fully modeled submarine. And each of these snapshots is a fully immersed 3D representation from the engineering bill of material that was brought in. As if I can come over here, you'll see that this has got literally thousands and thousands of parts. So no data was stripped out to be able to get it in a way that's easily consumable. And so perhaps as we're stepping through this scenario, we're talking with the manufacturing floors. They're putting this large submarine together and ensuring that there's proper clearance for somebody to fit through, that there's not going to be a trip hazard or some type of a space hazard in here. And so these stories can be put together as 3D interactive snapshots to enable not just engineers, but those across your enterprise and in your supply chain to be able to collaborate on the data. If I look here at perhaps another one, if we're talking about connecting with customers here, perhaps you want to be able to, in this time that we're living in this remote time, perhaps it's not feasible to meet face-to-face with a customer, but you still want to, as a company, build your brand loyalty and connect with customers. And so Perhaps a story, in this case, has been put together, which is a series of snapshots showcasing a couple of different options that somebody could choose through, whether it be some wheels here or different spoilers walking through this. And again, a fully immersed 3D interactive experience tied directly to your product data. And so, again, these stories are the mechanisms around which various groups can be brought in to collaborate. They can be brought in to solve issues. They can engage with suppliers. They can engage with customers. You can engage with your manufacturing departments. And so let's just dive into just a real quick look here about what this might look like in putting together a quick story. So let's imagine, I've got an issue where perhaps the engine in this supercar, we've upgraded the engine in it and it's caused a field defect and it's crashing out the rear suspension in there. I can come in and you can see here I've got the full bill of material with it. And again, I'm on just a normal standard issue laptop. As Rachel mentioned, we are cloud-based. And so being able to leverage the abilities of rendering all of the images in the cloud and streaming this down to your device enables Vertex to scale up both in model size, number of users, and device independency with that. So if I want to really quickly find the information, I'm not a trained engineer. I just need to quickly diagnose a problem, fix the issue, and maintain continuity here. I can just do a filter based on metadata that might have been brought in with your 3D information here. And I know it's my rod assembly here. So I'm going to add that filter. I'll be able to quickly find it. And now I just want to quickly pull that up. So I'm going to do the show only selected, bring it back in here. Here's that part. Now I want to build some context to that. And so I'm going to bring in some parts that are near it. And here I've got my full assembly quickly. So just being able to quickly dive into the problem area that I know, pull in some context for really being able to now tell my story and get that out to those that can fix it. So I want to just quickly come in here and add a couple of key items in here. I'm going to say that we've had an issue with space in here and we need our spring diameter fixed. And so I'll quickly denote a couple of dimensions. I'll be able to drop in my pen here and I'll say something to the effect that need a thicker diameter wire, and I'll add that pen. So now I've got a saved state of this geometry, this issue that I want to convey. And now I can come in here, as you'll see, it's saved a quick snapshot. I can put together a couple of different snapshots and click create a new story. And now I'm brought into this here where I can name the story here, perhaps spring issue. And I'm enabled now to share out this story instantly with the collaborators that I need to. You mentioned security previously, Joe. And again, this is where the Vertex platform is able to really provide companies with the security blanket that they need. Perhaps I don't want the individual to do any type of cross-sectioning on this, so I'm going to lock this down. I don't want this individual to do any type of measurement, cross-sectioning, or export on here. But perhaps if I come back to this one, because I've again only showed the things that I want to, I'm going to enable the export of the geometry only in this snapshot. And so as you can see here, the bill of material has been reduced automatically. There's no suppression, so no data is being inadvertently sent out other than what you wanted them to see specifically here. And again, because we are cloud-based and streaming data to it, there's no data being cached down to your collaborator's device. So truly being able to enable companies with sensitive and proprietary information to have confidence in knowing that the information that they need to get out to those who need to see it is safe, secure, they've got full control over it.
So let me ask you a question about that, if you don't mind. And I know we're on borrowed time for questions, and we'll run a little bit longer if we need to, because I think this is important. So from my experience in the past of having executive authority or disposition authority on this type of a story, actually, quite frankly. Travel a lot. I'm in airports. I'm typically, quite honestly, working from a tablet or my phone. And I understand the cloud, but I've also seen it where it, quite frankly, doesn't work, and it's not as efficient as solution providers would state. But what we've seen here, and I've been a part of MOD and nuclear marine before on subs, so that was actually quite an interesting rendering. Do people actually, executives across that ecosystem, have the ability to access this from their phone, review the rendering based off their security, and then submit feedback back?
Absolutely. And I might just send you this story here and there. So now you should, Joseph, be able to, you'll get a notification on your mobile device, and you'll be able to see that come up as a notification in your email and be able to access that. If I got your, did I get your email address wrong?
We're going to find out. So now you're testing me. Got my email right. And so what I'm going to ask you, so we avoid the silence of waiting on me to access my email on my phone. If you could continue talking a little bit, I'll try to pull this up, and we'll close once we have success here. And it could be user error. Remember, everyone, I started on pagers a long time ago. So John, Rachel, I'll let you continue while I access my email.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel, maybe I'll kick it over to you for a quick comment. You know, there's this issue where companies struggle with maintaining model revisions coming into the platform, and how do we, you know, maintain seamless sync of data through here?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, John, you and I have both heard a lot that the design process is always in motion, right? There's always new iterations, there's always new ideas. And how do you make sure that you're not working on something that's out of date? So Vertex has the capability to automatically update this information with new model versions. So you can set the story to automatically import new models, right? And then it will update your snapshots with new revised geometry without losing any of your markups, your notes, your comments, your cross sections, any of that. It just has the new geometry, and you're able to toggle back and forth between different versions in your story, so you can kind of see, okay, this was what we were working with a couple weeks ago, this is what we're working with now, these are the changes, and you can kind of look and see the differences in that. So you never really have to worry about, am I working on the right version? Is this the most up-to-date model that I should be seeing? It's all, we're really, our goal here is to give you a single source of communication so that you're not trying to go through different files, trying to go through different forms of communication. You can do it in one central place to keep all of your ideas contained, so you can kind of see the whole iteration process as it goes.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I can confirm I received the email, and I'm attempting to log in, and user error. John, what's my password? The age-old question. Don't say it over the line. That's I just need a password. I do have the email. User error.
I think it's you would have to create a temporary password on that. But while we're talking, Joseph, here again, as Rachel mentioned, you know, the not cutting corners piece of it that we come back to, as Rachel described here, you know, we find these workflows become very convoluted and can be messy when people take screenshots, when they send them out in emails. And as new model revisions roll into the Vertex platform and you've created a story to collaborate on, you have resolved the issue, for example, and let's say in this slide here, you can see clearly that this brake rotor is interfering with this brake pad assembly. We've been able to collaborate with the individuals that we need to resolve that. And now it is generated in a model revision. I don't need to go back and redo the work that I've done. I can come in here, I'll be notified that there's new geometry. I can click get this latest snapshots. I can update that, and now you'll see all of the affected geometry within this story is now being updated to revise, to reflect the issue now being mitigated. And not only do I see that in my story, but then all of my collaborators now are able to instantly get that update as well. So again, business continuity, not cutting corners, but finding ways to accelerate more efficiently in your workflows while maintaining the quality of data, particularly in this time of being remote.
Well, I appreciate it. And as all good Apple iPhones, I've got a software restart on my phone that just started. So I can confirm that, John, you should have had something coming through. But I don't want to go into much more time as there's questions. I will try to do this. And Dee, if you want to open it up to questions while my phone restarts and we get through the normal things that we're all dealing with from working from home and remotely, are there any questions, Dee?
At the moment, we don't have any, but if anybody wants to throw some in the questions box, we've got time for one or two here.
And without any questions, John and Rachel, one thing I think I'd like to expand upon while we have time is, what's your typical process for integrating with an incumbent PLM system? So you want to come in, you've been asked to come in, and now you've got to do the integration, the discovery process through functional requirement specs, all of those process upfront issues. What's your kind of typical process for accomplishing that?
Yeah, so we work with companies individually because we know that their processes could be different from company to company and how they script different integrations. And so we do integrate with all of the major PLM and PDM systems out there, but we really want to take a very measured approach and specific approach with our customers and being able to set up the right integration at the right intervals that are pulling the right data. So it's a very easy and smooth process, but one that we want to make sure we step through specifically to meet the needs of our individual customers.
And Rachel, how do you see development, new releases? What's some targets that maybe some sneak peeks you're okay with giving us without jeopardizing any future releases? But what are some things that intrigue you about where Vertex could go for the future?
That's a really great question. I know that, John, you're a little bit more tapped into what might be coming down the pipe, and I know that some of our releases might be a little bit more delayed than we would like to be with all of the new things that are happening out in the world. So I might actually bounce this question back to John.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're working on right now from excellent.
There it is.
Access through my mobile after a Apple software restart. Very simple process. As John's talking, I'm actually going to play around and respond back and see how we do.
Outstanding. So we're really wanting to provide practical ways for businesses to maintain continuity, especially now in this time of remote work. But we want to be careful to convey to the audience here that we're not looking for band-aid solutions. We're going to see a new normal, and that companies should be looking for improved processes, workflows, and tools that set themselves up for not only success now, but success in the new normal that we're going to have coming down the pipe. And so we continue to work on things that make it easy for individuals across the organization to have access to data, to be able to make data-driven decisions. And we continue to knock down barriers to whatever might come up from either a data transformation standpoint, workflow standpoint, process standpoint, things from like single sign-on, just as simple as that, making it super easy for somebody to get into the platform literally with a click of a button. And then being able to expand into some of these areas that Rachel alluded to, and Joe, you prompted here about what are we doing with big data and how do we leverage big data combined with a visualization engine that allows companies to accelerate when maybe other companies might be struggling with data, to gain competitive advantages, to build brand loyalty, and being able to say, we've got all this data, let's use it in a way that protects our employees, that connects with our customers, that provides predictive maintenance, that enables new and better ways of connecting with customers. And so that's really our vision and a passion for the future.
And that's exciting. And there's one thing I kind of want to close on and touch on and give the listeners one more persona to think about, especially with what just happened, right? We did a impromptu demo. I called out the solution provider. I actually received a task in my email, all from my phone, accessed it from my phone, had a software glitch, phone restarted as we're sitting in a meeting. So I want everyone to realize this happens every single day. For every manager, leader, employee in the workforce, we are in meetings consistently and constantly throughout the day. And the majority of us are multitasking. Having the ability to sit as a leader in a meeting and quickly access something that could have been urgent. Let's take this example that we just walked through. This could have been a 24/7 urgent issue, which typically would have meant I was pulled out of a meeting. That meeting most likely would have been rescheduled. So we would have wasted the efforts and time of those resources, and that costs money. I would have had to go track down an actual machine where I could log in and review and improve. And the reality is I just did it within 5 minutes. And I think what we've simply described here is a quite complex and secure solution. And I have to say I'm as I've told John and Rachel in the past, usability is a major priority of mine. Typically we give our users food poisoning, right? At our internal companies, we promise them these great solutions, and we don't actually give them a usable and functional solution, as we would as a consumer. You know, when you look at an app-based, cloud-based world, the majority of these solutions are remarkable from a usability perspective. They're laid out properly. The screens they're not cluttered. White space is used correctly. And I have to say, from a user, that was seamless. And as a leader that's lived in the industrial world, having the capability to know and to relax that if there is an urgent issue in the field or in design or in manufacturing, that I can easily access it from my phone, that's a competitive advantage. That wasn't a picture, right? That wasn't a screen grab.
Oh,
that was live.
Yep, absolutely.
So with that, John and Rachel, we have about 5 minutes to close out. As we started, we allowed you to kind of introduce yourselves. I'd also allow you the opportunity to close out. You know, this has been a great discussion, a very informative discussion for me. I'm actually looking forward to digging into this a little bit more and distributing this recording to our distribution, because I think it's quite powerful. And I think once our listeners actually comprehend what you're offering across the ecosystem, the light bulb will come on. So I would like to allow you to close it down too. So John and Rachel, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Rachel?
Sure, I can go ahead and start. I think that we're in a very unique time, obviously, and I think that gives us a lot of opportunities to try new things that allow us to optimize and to improve. One thing that I would potentially challenge the listeners today, listeners tomorrow, whoever is hearing this, we are all driven to optimize and improve. That's just human nature. It's human nature to be curious and innovative, and especially on an engineering side, you want to be innovative. You want to ask questions and solve problems, but doing things continuously the same old way, it doesn't lend itself to that, especially in today's day of new tech and new opportunities. So I would challenge people to tap into your curiosity, challenge the status quo of what you're working with right now, your outdated processes, or if you resonated with some of those things, like, yeah, I do screenshots to share with my collaborators. It is really hard to not be able to travel anymore to talk to my supply chain. Challenge that status quo. And kind of what Joe alluded to earlier, when you're looking for things, skepticism isn't necessarily a bad thing, so long as you use it to your advantage. Ask hard questions, evaluate things with a very critical eye, to make sure that you're really getting what you're looking for, and you're not going to get the food poisoning. But also have an open mind to approach new tools and tech with curiosity, this positive skepticism, to decide, is this really going to improve my process? Is this going to make the products that I build better? And just have an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. And again, we keep coming back to this whole idea of this cutting corners. And now is not the time for organizations to cut corners as they're trying to maintain business continuity, as they're trying to realign their processes for what will most likely be a new normal, a new way of operating going forward. And there's so many different ways that organizations can be pulled right now. And I would encourage organizations, as they're looking at remote tactics, as they're looking about changing things going forward, to continue to keep the safety of their employees, the safety of their customers, and the quality of the product that they've invested years into, to not let that suffer during this time, to not become complacent, but to, as Rachel mentioned, to continue to challenge the status quo and look for areas to improve. Use this time as a time of reflection. What hasn't worked well? What maybe on the outside looked like it worked well, but isn't really. Now is the time to do that inward reflection as an organization, and to really realign the priorities for the safety of your employees, the safety of your customers, and the quality of your product.
Thanks, Rachel and John. And I'd like to close with and kind of summary a little bit with something that John has said in a discussion in past about freeing your data. And Vertex allows you the ability to free your data. So I'd like the audience to think about what that truly means throughout your ecosystem, but also understand that digital transformation was 15 years ago. The age of digital acceptance is here. That does mean you need to free your data. That does mean you need to modernize your business models. And it also means you need to invest in your workforce. And I think that's the message you've heard here today. And it excites me because, quite honestly, Vertex is a solution provider, but they get it. And John, Rachel, this has been an excellent conversation. I hope to have another one soon. And to our listeners, thank you. And if you have any questions, please contact Vertex and/or IPX. And with that, Rachel, John, Deanna, thanks for hosting. And to everyone else, have a good evening, a good afternoon, and a good morning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.